Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We've got a few folks joining here. We'll give it a couple more minutes before we dive in, but this is meant to be informal. We had actually done this last year, and frankly, we did not have a lot of people come to them, but we're trying to broaden the subject matter. We also have been making these promises that we'll test your skills during the course of these office hours. So you can feel free to put us to the test on that to see if we can actually deliver on that. I guess, if we can't test your skill in an hour, you get your money back. We're working on different slogans. But actually, we will follow up with you if we can't figure out a solution immediately to automate your testing. I'm sure we'll be in touch shortly after with a more robust answer. But yeah, this is meant to be just a fun environment to talk about voice development and testing. And I'm just starting to talk. I haven't even introduced myself. I'm John Kelvie, and I'm joined by.
My name is Emerson Sklar. Glad to have you guys joining with us today.
All right, so my thought with this is one, we want your questions. So please, you can put that in the chat or the questions channel there. And we will, of course, address those first. And then also I had a couple little projects that I guess I might ask myself questions about, or Emerson and I might kind of work through that would make this kind of fun and useful, regardless of how many questions we get.
Yeah, and I would say we also have some poll questions there on the polls tab in the upper right-hand corner. If you guys want to fill that out, this helps us understand, what our customers are doing and where some of the challenges they might be seeing, and kind of where we can help.
So any questions for us? How's your voice app development going? People that have joined. Any comments, any thoughts? I was really intrigued by the new, with the web player for gaming. I don't think I have the name quite right, but it, to me, it looks like APL, we hardly knew ye before it's getting deprecated for HTML, which I think is a good decision on Amazon's part. That was a pretty quirky thing.
Yeah. Except for some of the Alexa champions, I don't know of a whole lot of people that used APL to great success. And even some of those champions, there are great blog posts of people making simple games with it, but pretty tough to wrap your head around. So I think that move will make it a lot easier for people to use technology they're a lot more familiar with already.
Yeah, this is not a testing.
Oops, it looked like we lost John. Seemed to be some internet connectivity issues in Peru today. While you guys are thinking of questions, curious to know if anybody has used the new Echo Studio, which is the high-end streaming audio device that they released. It was about 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago, I think on the 5th. Seems to be pretty similar in quality to the high-end Sonos devices, at least to my untrained ear. Seems to be nicer quality than the Apple devices. Very attractive price point. I think one of the challenges is the requirement for the more expensive Amazon Music subscriptions. Number of subscriptions that people have already, paying an extra $5 a month on top of the Amazon Music price is potentially a detractor, but it's very, very good quality audio. I'm talking about the Echo Studio, John.
Yeah, and so you told me you were trying out the Ultra HD?
Yeah, Ultra HD. So the Ultra HD is so they have the standard quality, HD, Ultra HD, and then Ultra HD 360. And
okay. So there's a tier beyond Ultra HD.
Yeah, and they say there's 1,000 songs that are in the 360-degree audio today. I've only been able to find maybe 150 or 200 songs. And it sounds nice. It sounds, immersive. It doesn't sound true to the song. Because it's another mix that they do beyond the lossless audio that they would have for the Ultra HD. But the raw Ultra HD stuff sounds fantastic, and the device puts out a surprising amount of sound for something that tiny. I think it's an ideal device for a backyard barbecue or something. It certainly makes enough noise to annoy your neighbors. But it's also for people with a data cap. I mean, the Ultra HD songs are like a megabyte a second or so. So it'll burn through a low data cap pretty quickly if you're actually streaming that content. The HD and stuff is more reasonable, but there is definitely a price to pay for incredibly high quality streaming audio content.
Yeah, I still feel like 128 kbps MP3 is enough for me.
Yeah.
Like 192 is like, okay. Now you're. The Ultra HD, I'm sure, is like an order of magnitude at least more than that.
Yeah. It's like, have you seen not voice related, but the Google Stadia, the new streaming gaming device, the console that Google is putting out, which comes out here pretty soon, but that streams 1080p, 60 FPS, it's 100 megs a minute. And so for that, you're gonna again burn through these data caps pretty quickly. I don't know about in Peru. In Seattle, I think I have a terabyte or something a month, which I never get close to. But I don't think that's the norm in this area, even for faster.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't get close to them. So maybe we can take a look at the end-to-end test I wanted to do. So I've been working on a skill, and I think I can share my screen here. So I've been working on this skill for a little bit. And trying to make this into, what I think is a showcase for best practices. It's a trivia/podcast playing skill based on a podcast that I like called Classic Movie Musts. And where I've gotten with this so far is I've added automated unit testing. I think I have the configuration. I think I have two configurations in VS Code here. One that allows debugging. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I take that back. The debugging is only on running our test command, but it'd be pretty easy to add this also to use our BST proxy. I also just run the BST proxy directly from the command line for testing with real payloads from Alexa. So that's a nice feature with our proxy that you get. I do the local debugging with VS Code. That's what this is right here. Basically, I run our tests with this configuration, and using that, I'm able to directly step into the code and test it and debug it directly on my laptop, which is a nice feature. This is set to have a continuous integration with Travis CI. And then there's also automated deployment built in. So quite a bit of stuff, but a big piece that's actually missing here is our end-to-end testing. So this is all nice, but we're not doing anything that really tests this skill as if a real user was speaking to it. And actually, a conversation that Emerson and I had with the prospective customer this week, they were saying, how would you, if you have multiple different environments, dev, prod, and whatnot, which I do actually have for this skill, how would you run different end-to-end tests, based on that environment? Which I thought, that's an interesting question, and we don't have a good example of that. In terms of how we handle environments in here, I mean, this is like the least exciting code you're ever going to see, at least if you're not into DevOps. I guess I do kind of get excited by it because I like DevOps. But this is all just glue code to do deployments depending on the type of environment. So it's doing things, it takes as an argument, what environment should I be deploying to? Is it dev or prod? It loads in environment variables based on those different environments. It expects a target. Do you want to deploy everything or just the Lambda, the model, or the skill, which if you've used the Ask CLI, you'll be familiar with those choices. I do checks to see if it's a CI environment because, essentially there's things that we assume about how things are configured if you're running it locally on your laptop versus if you're running in a CI environment. And then basically just do a bunch of file replacements, or variable replacements, variable substitutions on files based on the environment. So, looking at, we want to have one skill.json file, and then depending on whether it's dev or prod, we change things in it. Like what's the function name, what's the Lambda ARN, what's the skill ID. Those are the sorts of properties that we change. So just a lot of, if you look at our skill.json, we've got a single templated skill.json. And most of this, it doesn't need to change based on whether or not we're talking about the dev version of the skill or the prod version of the skill, but the function name is different. And, geez, is that it? Oh, the skill name is different. So that's a variation. In our model, the invocation name is different. I mean, this is the type of stuff that at some point one sort of hopes that this will be incorporated into the Ask CLI. But for now, you just end up kind of writing this glue code. Oh yeah, Emerson, can you not talk while I'm showing my screen?
Oh, I can. I was muted.
Or you? Okay. So
Yeah, and I wonder how many people are doing, like how many people have a sophisticated enough voice development life cycle that they really are doing different work and substantially different work in a dev or product environment.
I don't think it's that many people. I do think amongst, the overlap between the people doing it and people that would be interested in writing automated tests that, we like to talk to, there's probably, a healthy portion there that does overlap. But I do think the fact that you do have to write all this glue code, I mean, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, it's 117 lines of code, but it's all doing pretty basic stuff. That said, I think if Amazon wants more people to do continuous integration, continuous deployment type practices to adopt that, it would be beneficial to adopt this into the Ask CLI and have some easy way to say, I've got one skill.json and these are the three parameters that change based on which environment or profile it's in. I think that would really do a lot to sort of accelerate the adoption of this type of thing. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, at the end of the day, you're basically just substituting a few values. You want to have the right skill name, you want to have the right Lambda name, but then you're just calling the Ask CLI. It all just boils down to a couple calls to the Ask CLI.
I wonder what Amazon's plan is for future enhancement and maintenance of the Ask CLI. I mean, to my knowledge, it hasn't been changed significantly in quite some time, right?
No, but I do think so. There is some stuff because I took this from other glue code that I have. I mean, I put this together pretty recently, but I did notice, for example, that like you'll see in here, like if you really go through this closely, you'll see I create an Ask CLI config file. I'm pretty sure that's no longer necessary. You can instead just use environment variables for it, which is a DevOps person. I mean, so they have environment variables, I believe now in the new versions of the Ask CLI that are going to, they're preferred over looking at the CLI_config file if they're there. And so I don't have to actually, like right here, I'm taking environment variables because as a DevOps person, you're almost always using environment variables and not files. That's sort of a best practice. But then I'm taking the environment variables and writing them out to file. I didn't have enough time to look into it, but I think that might no longer be necessary. So that is a nice improvement. That would be 15 lines of code we could take out. Hopefully. Like I said, I need to test it to see. But I haven't seen a lot feature function wise. That is more like that's a shift in the orientation from Ask CLI being something, oh, here's a tool for people to use locally on their development laptop to, oh, here's something to integrate into a CI process. But so the first step with this skill is just to add an end-to-end test period, because I don't have any end-to-end test for it. So I'm going to go ahead. I'll add a new test folder. I'm going to call it ETE. And first, we'll just call it first test.ete.yabl. And, you know, writing a first test here, open the skill and play trivia. So we're gonna just do something that opens the skill and plays trivia. And actually, I'll immediately put in something to help solve the challenge I'm trying to overcome, which is that I do want to test in two different environments. I want to test against the dev environment and also against the prod. And really, the only thing that changes between those two for this skill is the invocation name. So I'm going to put this in as invocation name, and then we use a find replace to then actually change that invocation name when we actually run the test. And say, welcome to Classic Movie Musts. And let's see. And that right there is a test, by the way. So if you're not familiar with our stuff, I mean, this is a basic test. What I'm saying here is open the skill, and then I'm saying check for this as the expected spoken response coming from Alexa. And we can certainly get more complex with these end-to-end tests, but that's sort of a basic starting point. Now, what's different about our end-to-end test and our unit test is that you do need a virtual device here. Let's see here. I have too many virtual devices and too many files, so let's see if I can just go find one quickly. So I logged into our dashboard. Here's our virtual device. I'm going to go ahead and use this one. And so now I can set this in my testing.json. And that should be all that's necessary. So let's see if I can run this test. ETE. I called it first test. Oh, and okay, so I have both end-to-end tests and unit tests in the same project. So in that case, I want to specify for this specific test which type it is. I can also do this in the command line. You know, I could say dash type ETE, but instead I'll just put it in the file there. Oh, all right, I'm saying I need to put in a locale. Thought that should default to US, but all right. Okay, so I said open invocation name, and Alexa says, I don't know that. So I also need to specify here, and this is how we do, this is a common way to do different environments. And I say invocation name, in this case it should be classic movie must. And then I can also set that by an environment variable, which I'll show in a moment. But right here, what we're saying here is when you encounter invocation name, replace it with this. And so that's how I'll test the prod version of my skill. For the dev version, this would be must classic movies. That's what I call my dev version. But so now let's run it again, now that I add that in.
And that find replace can be on both the utterance that we're sending as well as the expected results. Like it's essentially find anything that's in that test.
It'll do anything. Any place it encounters this within the test files, it will replace it. And one thing that's interesting about that, we have two things that operate as sort of find replaces on those tests, because we have the find replace, and then we also do these homophones, which some of you who've used our stuff may have seen. But the difference between those, they have different purposes, but then also quite literally the difference is the find replace is operating before the test is run, whereas the homophones are acting upon what comes back from the test. So for example, we might use a homophone where, like here's the actual reply from the skill. So that's nice. We got that back. The test didn't pass, but that's because I didn't have the right expected response. This looks like the right, yeah, that looks like the right response. Well, so right here is an example. So it came back with classic movie must. So we have the audio reply from Alexa, and it thinks that it's saying classic movie must, but there's actually should be an S there. It's okay for this transcript not to be perfect. We don't need to fix everything in it. The idea is just to confirm that it is, the skill is behaving appropriately. But if that did bother me, if I did want to fix it, I can put in something like this. Oops. I think that's homophones. I'm not 100% sure if it's homophone or homophones though. So this is a good excuse to check our docs. I'll do a quick search up here. I love our search feature. This was provided to us by Algolia, which is a really great company. And oops, but that's okay. That's within our API. So I want to look at the configuration here. Okay, and it is in fact homophones. It's good. So double check that. And what this is saying is in that transcript that comes back, if you encounter classic movie must, change it to the plural here. So that's a small point, but just to illustrate the sort of, I guess, a little bit of the more advanced features that we have.
Well, and that's like super relevant for for a lot of companies that are doing non-trivial skills that have names of individuals, names of companies, names of products that are not standard common English words. I mean, Alexa's pretty good at like famous people names, pretty good at names of U.S. cities, but for things that are not that don't represent any common interaction with Alexa, being able to identify like how Google speech to text is going to translate it back is definitely helpful. I don't know many people that use must in the growth sense. So
it's a bit of an unusual trademark. So good, our test passed, right? That's good to see. And here we're running this and we're still collecting coverage. We don't really need to collect coverage on this. I guess I'm right here sort of showing you guys something that I think is not a best practice. I guess we should come up with a best practice for this. I really want to keep these tests in the same project because that's just convenient for me as the author. But we do typically recommend that the end-to-end tests, because they're usually the domain of QA, that they should go in their own project. And one of the reasons is you'll typically have quite different testing.json files. Like you already saw that I changed the type to E2E here. That's one thing that's different. But then there's also things in our overall test configuration. A handler is not relevant for an end-to-end test. Homophones are not relevant for unit tests. Code coverage is not relevant for end-to-end tests. End-to-end tests don't really have access to the actual source code. So there's no, unless you really jump through some hoops, you're not going to be getting code coverage from them. And we wouldn't really encourage it. The place to get code coverage is on your unit tests. So they're really very different files. I guess since this is supposed to be best practices, I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at what I think is a best practice, or maybe could be a best practice. We'll see kind of how it feels. Oops. Putting under lib is definitely not best practice. So I want to move this up to the top level. All right, I love VS Code, but this is moving files around is not its best feature. No, I still landed under another. Jeez.
You may have to drag it up to classic movie musts itself.
No, that didn't do it. All right, let's go to the terminal. Broke me down thoroughly. MV E2E dot. All right. We were recently talking on Slack internally to our company about how the VS Code team, somebody pointed out a press release from VS Code where they said that they had closed like 3,000 bugs, but 1,900 had been opened in the same time. It sounded like it was over a period of a month. I haven't noticed a lot of bugs in VS Code, but maybe that was one. Maybe I should put in one of those 1,900 bugs for December. But so I moved this here, and let's go ahead and have our own testing.json for this. And so we'll have a testing.json for E2E, and then we have one for our unit testing as well, obviously. And then we can take out the stuff that's not relevant for the for the end-to-end test here. Trace, collect coverage is false. We don't need any of that. And that's about it. And that makes for a cleaner file there. And then we'll just go over here and we can run our test again, and we can just do a star.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I wonder what what development environment most people are using. I mean, I do think, and maybe it's because the best of the Ask tutorials are geared towards VS Code, but I do think that's certainly the most common that I've encountered. But I'd be curious for people in the audience or a broader customer base what people are using.
I would as well. My instinct is it's VS Code. I've used a lot of different IDEs. I've been just amazed by how good VS Code is, especially of late. I think I've been taking more advantage of it, and maybe these features were already there, but like this week alone, I've done, we've been doing more and more little sample projects. We hope to be, we've been doing them on a customer by customer basis, but hope to put more of those out there for everyone to see, sample projects in Java, sample projects in Python, JavaScript, obviously. I've used VS Code for all of them. And it's just, it's so easy going from Java to Python, and the same great features are available everywhere. It auto recognizes your unit tests and allows you to run each one individually, really easy to set up debug configurations for each environment. Just really amazing stuff. And it's not, I was really impressed I'm not well-versed in Python, but going in and using it with Python, there was very little I had to do to, get it work right. It's such a great tool. These were the tests. This is the test report that came out for this. Looks nice. Again, this is a really simple test at this point. Let's maybe make it slightly more complex here. And there's a few choices I have. I'm going to go ahead and say play trivia when I start. Oops. And so I'm going to say play trivia, and then I'm putting a wild card here because I'm going to get one of several different questions. I don't know which one. I'm not going to enumerate all of them. I don't recall of anything that's common between them. It doesn't always say, here's your question or something like that. So I'll just do a wild card there. And then in reply to the trivia, I'll give a wrong answer. So we can go ahead and run this now. Maybe we can look at the utterances while this is running. That always makes it a little more exciting. The tests run about as fast as you can talk, or as you would normally talk. I do always caveat that by saying that even though we can't make it run faster, or we can't make it run much faster, we can run many tests at once. That's the benefit of our virtual devices. So you can run lots of tests fairly quickly by running them in parallel. Even if the individual tests take some time, running them in parallel will make it run fairly quickly. What do I do? Settings. They moved around where you can see the utterances. I think I go to the privacy now. Maybe I need to click on this again. Oh, I need to click on history, right? Yeah. So that hasn't changed. I just clicked on the wrong one. The screen has changed.
Yeah, there is a different, I'll paste it in the chat box. There's a different URL you can use.
Why am I not seeing my data here?
Try that one I just chatted at you. In the live storm chat, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, Diego said I think he's right. It may be a different account.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, my virtual device is associated. So here, this has come up more than once, and I have too many virtual devices. So what should I do? I have a virtual device, and you have an account with us, and you signed up with a certain email with Bespoken. But then when you're creating virtual devices, you're linking them to Amazon accounts, and you might link it to one of several different accounts. If you're like me, you have many, many different Amazon accounts. And so I find myself trying to figure out what virtual device is that, what account am I actually talking to with that one? And so to do that, I'll just grab my token. And I'll say, what is the account name? I think that's the phrase.
And Kevin, in answer to your question, Kevin had asked, when running in parallel, is that across multiple simulated devices to achieve that? Yes, you're absolutely right. That's the way we can scale up multiple of these virtual devices, have them executing at the same time. So again, each test still runs at about human speech speed. But if you have 100 tests, I don't know if you necessarily want to spin up 100 virtual devices, but if you have a broad array of tests, you can parallelize the execution across those devices.
I thought, what is my account name will work. I'm gonna try what is device name. That's gonna be less definitive, but it'll give us a clue. Should give us a clue. If I don't get it this time, I'm going to go to our FAQ because we do have, there we go. The name is Bespoken's 13th virtual device. So what does this mean? I picked out a virtual device that's associated with one of our Bespoken test accounts. So yeah, that's why I'm not seeing it in my privacy history there. And so for that one, if I wanted to see that history of utterances, what I would do for that token, I would sign out and then sign back in with my Bespoken test account. I'm not going to do that now, but that's basically what you do. So BST speak, what is the device name? And we do have this on our docs as well. I thought this was a helpful thing. Yvonne had written this up. Let's see if I can find it with our nice search. Yeah, this was a great FAQ. It's a hell of a long answer, actually. But it's meant to deal with a lot of the really common issues that we run into. And so you can see here, you say, what is the device name? And then you get back that info there. there's lots of other helpful tips for sort of common debugging issues. But anyways, know that that is there. We do have this document. It's not just, you don't have to just memorize it from watching me go through this. So we ran this test again. And actually, Emerson, let me know if there's questions there, because obviously we do care more about the questions. This little demo. So I wrote some tests. I could go much further with these tests. Like, for example, with this trivia skill, maybe I would want to test the actual trivia questions. Now with that, that's not going to be well suited to our YAML syntax. For that, I might write a JavaScript test to say, oh, if the trivia question is X, the answer is Y. And then I could do a more precise test on it. But instead, I'm going to go as far as then saying, I'm going to get a question, I'm going to answer it incorrectly, and then at that point, this skill gives you the option to listen to the podcast associated with that trivia question, which I think is a cool feature. And so I can say, play this episode. And then I'm going to confirm that the stream URL that comes back, well, for now, we'll just say that it starts with HTTPS.
You've got the Steam URL.
Oh.
Diego has a good question. He says, do I need multiple Amazon Google accounts to run tests in parallel? And if so, does that mean multiple Bespoken accounts as well?
Yes, that's an excellent question. You do need multiple accounts for Amazon and Google to run tests in parallel. The reason is it's not even sufficient to set up multiple virtual devices with one account. What we find is if you have multiple virtual devices associated with the same, say Amazon account, and you're talking to them using our API at the same time, the results become unpredictable. So when we do testing in parallel, we actually have these accounts labeled Bespoken Test 1 through like 20. And we have virtual devices associated with each one. And we are then, by having those different virtual devices associated with different accounts, we're able to send many utterances simultaneously for testing. So you do need multiple Amazon accounts. You do want to create a virtual device, a unique virtual device for each account for running it in parallel. You do not need multiple Bespoken accounts. The thing to keep in mind is you can create all those different virtual devices, within a single Bespoken account. So we don't have a limitation there, but you do, at least if you're running things in parallel, you do bump into that limitation with how Alexa works. And I do think, if you sit and think about it, the unpredictability of replies sort of makes sense to me. If you have multiple people in your home talking on the same account to Alexa devices, the fact that, I guess it should work. It seems like it should, but it doesn't surprise me, I guess, that it doesn't work quite right. In theory, people could be doing things that are sort of contradicting what they say to it. So. So running these tests again, I made a few changes there.
And that stream URL verification is pretty helpful as well. You and I have talked to a whole bunch of companies that are doing streaming audio in the last couple months, and especially on on some of the streaming music providers that have thousands and thousands of titles in their portfolio. Being able to verify when I say play, "Shake It Off" by Taylor Swift, it actually gives me that proper song. Is super important, and pretty painful and challenging for a human to do it, to know that it's the right version of the song, even though it's the right song at all. But super, super easy to do, really just through that YAML syntax.
Yeah. So we set up these different pieces. Now we want to tie our end-to-end test into our CI. And so I haven't shown this before, but this is the Travis configuration file. We are using Travis for the continuous integration here. It's not particularly complicated what we're doing, but we do have a couple different scripts. So we have a test script, which runs tests and then pushes code coverage to codecov.io, which is a tool that we like to use a lot. It allows us to see the history of our code coverage over time. And then I have a deploy dev target and I have a deploy prod target. And what's nice about having these end-to-end tests is when I do this continuous deployment, after I deploy it, I can run my tests. So let's see. So I'm going to install our tools here. Or actually, I take this back. So we have Bespoken tools in the project. It's in this package.json. So what that means is I can set up a simple script here, like, let's call it E2E prod. We'll start off with that. So I want to run the end-to-end tests in prod. And so I'll do cd E2E and bst test star. So I define that in here. If I just want to see if that works, I can go here and I can do npm run E2E prod. I'm just going to run that little script. And why doesn't it like that? And now regular expression. Okay, so for some reason it didn't like me putting a wildcard in here. I really have no idea why that was. You can put wildcards on a command line. That's some sort of quirk to NPM that I'm not familiar with. But so I define this little task in my package.json, and then I go back over here, and then for my deployment, I say npm run et prod.
Is that RPM? Looks like.
Oh yeah. This is the benefit of pair programming.
Yeah.
So what have we accomplished here? We wrote some end-to-end tests. We created a simple npm script for them. We made them parameterizable by the invocation name. And so I can set up a separate one to parameterize it for dev. I'll do that as a follow-on after this. And I tied it into my CI process here with this one little line. And so, if you're not familiar with Travis, if you haven't written a lot of kind of DevOps glue code, I don't know, a lot of this might seem a little bit intimidating, but none of this is particularly complicated. It's more about bringing these pieces together. And so, for example, with the glue code that I wrote here, this started off pretty small, and I've just steadily added little features to it as I've gone along. And so you could feel free to use this as a template for your own build process, or even just take some of the ideas from it for building sort of a simpler one for your own needs. But the nice thing is that the outcome that I get is not just now am I running end-to-end, not just do I have these end-to-end tests that I can run on an ad hoc basis, I'm running them now whenever I do a deployment. So when I push stuff out to prod, it runs the test. I can be certain that nothing went wrong with that deployment. And I can basically smoke test the whole experience. I don't have a lot of tests here, so it's not in a lot of depth, but just making sure that those core interactions work, that I can open the skill, start to play the game, play back my podcast. That's the core of the experience that I've provided here, sort of the happy path. Doing that same sort of testing for your own skills is definitely something that we recommend. More advanced stuff, this is extra credit stuff I would give to myself or anybody else out there, is, let's say I run into an error here, perhaps I want to have it automatically roll back. That's something that can be done. We actually have done that in circumstances. And with a little more work, we could incorporate a feature like that. Or at least, minimally ensure that there's a proper notification sent out to parties if there are errors on those post-deployment tests. And I want to stop sharing here. Oh, no, I disabled. Disable screen sharing. There we go.
Yeah, so I see we have about 3 minutes left. Anybody on the line? Anyone have any last minute questions? Even if it's something we can't answer in 3 minutes, certainly can follow back up if people have any challenges they've encountered. If they want any additional information about the stuff that you showed, John.
I solved my own testing problem here. We want to solve your testing problems, but I guess one question, we probably should have put this as a poll. Are people comfortable putting out specific test scenarios in something that's sort of an open forum like this?
That's a good question.
Well, next time we do this, we can add that as a poll. I will say also this is for Kevin, the Java piece that I've been working on is something that we'll send to you. I think you'll find it very interesting. Where would you validate screen display? So in this one, I think there's a card that comes back. So, oh, I'm not sharing my screen. So let me go back and do that. So here's another feature I don't think everyone knows about. So I say trace is true, and I'll be able to see the full payload that comes back at each step in the test. And so I should be able to see the display output associated with this test. Oh, all right. I immediately confused myself. So here's the downside of having two testing.json. I edited the wrong one. So maybe this is not the best practice to do separate configurations. So don't consider that a formal recommendation. This is an experiment. We'll see if we really recommend it as a best practice. We do feel very confident that if you have dedicated QA folks, put the end-to-end tests in their own repository. They sort of have their own life. That's our feeling about it. They shouldn't be munged in with the code. But for me as a developer, where I'm, this is my own skill that I'm maintaining, and I don't have separate dedicated QA people working with me on it. It's nice. It's just a convenient thing to have them in the same repo. So we should, we're trying to find a way to support that. But yeah, so here you can see all the data that's coming back. It's quite a bit. But if I wanted to grab, I'm not going to be able to put this together just in this moment, but it would, if I want to get this file here, we support JSON path. I don't think we feature this enough. JSON path is rather amazing. And if I was working with a complex JSON path expression, I'd actually take this JSON payload. There's good online JSON path evaluators. And so you take the JSON you're playing with, you paste it in there, and you can just query it to your heart's delight. Yeah, this is the one I use. And so you can just play around with the different expressions and get really immediate feedback on it. This is super handy. For example, I can put in a number, and then it goes from giving me the type property to the number property. JSON path is a very succinct way to query your JSON.
Yeah, that should be pretty familiar for people who are doing or who have done like web and mobile automation using using XPaths for locators.
Yeah, and so I can put in something like this. And I could even just cut and paste this logo in here. But in this way, I can test some of this deeper content that's coming back.
Kevin, was that the kind of display content you were inquiring about? Perfect.
Yes, yeah, all that data comes back. It's the same either way. Yeah, what we've been working on the Java side is a sample project that shows Jenkins, JUnit, and hopefully App Dynamics. Emerson and I are having a problem getting a trial App Dynamics account. And Emerson even knows people there. I don't know anybody there, so I'm getting nowhere. I think he's making some progress.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. I've pinged a couple of former coworkers. So,
well, if not, we'll use Datadog for our sample. But I think we've got a nice little piece of sample code that shows how to tie stuff together using those, Java, JUnit, Jenkins, and some sort of stats-D type stack that I think will be cool. And we're initially that's just for a specific use case, but we'll try to share that more broadly because we think that the concept is applicable, and we do know we know a lot of people are using that stack similar to Python. I'm excited to get some examples out there in Python because I know for a lot of our customers that's their preferred programming language. So we've gone over on time, but I hope this was useful. I've enjoyed it.
yeah, always fun to see the master at work.
But next time we'll go through one of your projects, Emerson.
Cool.
Or we'll actually, hopefully, we'll be going through an actual user's project. That would be even better.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for joining. Thanks for the participation. Good questions. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to shoot us an email or reach out to us. Always here to help. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a great afternoon.